check and make them go away. Okay, retaliation. Retaliation, we talked about that a little bit in Sarbanes-Oxley. The idea is if somebody makes an allegation toward my company, legally, I need to avoid any kind of retaliatory measure. Okay, this might sound like common sense. Yeah, we get that. Somebody has a right to, make an accusation or whatever. But if I'm a manager of a group and I have 10 employees, and one employee in that group accuses me of sexual harassment, I probably don't want to talk to them. I don't want to talk to them about their work while the investigation is going on. And let's say the investigation goes through and it comes out, no, AV wasn't guilty, he didn't do anything wrong, just a misunderstanding or whatever it is. I still don't like that person. That person drug my name through the mud. They hurt my credibility. They've hurt my career. And I want to retaliate against them. I want to give them low performance ratings. I want to fire them. I want to get them off of my team. And so this might seem like, duh, we don't retaliate, but it is in our nature, like as humans, if you get punched, to punch somebody back, right? And so this is very difficult, as you can see by the EEOC claims. You hear a lot about race lawsuits, gender lawsuits, disability lawsuits, but the number one type of case that the EEOC takes on is actually retaliation. In all categories, somebody exercised their right to complain, make an accusation, ask a question, and they were retaliated against by their company. So big area for HR managers and line managers that we train them in. No retaliation. Okay, here's the big law. Civil Rights Act of 1964, also called the Title VII laws, also called the Civil Rights laws. There's a lot of things that it's called. But this is a very big, broadly sweeping law. Happened in 1964 that, if you remember your civics or your United States history lessons, that should tell you, right, the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, Martin Luther King, a lot of civil rights transition in the United States. And so this was the big law that said, hey, you can't discriminate on hiring or firing or compensation or work assignments based on a lot of things. Race is the one that stands out because that's kind of what the law was initially written for, but included, gender, race, national origin, religion is in there. Religion is somewhat like kind of a common law doctrine that is tied to national origin. It's not clear on that, but it's in the law anyway now. So very broad. This is the one, like if a company's going to get sued for millions of dollars, this is usually the law. This law carries what's called punitive damages, meaning if you fire me for a reason that's illegal or improper, right? It's called wrongful discharge, and I sue, and you have to bring me back now. I get back pay, salary, back pay benefits, but I also get what's called punitive, meaning punishment damages. So if I make $100,000 a year and I was out of work for 6 months, you might give me 50 grand to make it up, but you're going to pay me a couple million because you discriminated based on X, something else. That's the punitive damages. This one scares the heck out of HR people and lawyers, quite obviously. Applies to private employers, 15 or more employees. I had a question. I was consulting with a client here in Washington State recently, and they said, okay, does this mean that if we have less than 15 employees, we can discriminate based on race? And I said, well, it's kind of an odd question. If that's something that you want to do, go ahead and tell me because I'm leaving. But technically, no, even legally in Washington State, because you have the Human Rights Commission, which goes to 8 employees. And they said, well, if we had less than 8 employees, is when I said, shut up. But anyway, you get the idea. It applies to most employers, certainly all large employers. Educational institutions, private, public, you can read it. But where this comes up often, which we'll talk about some cases here in a minute, is the educational institutions. Universities often have various types of affirmative action programs, which we'll deal with here in a second. Here it is, affirmative action. So, what is affirmative action? You can see in the title itself, it's action taken to deal with or to affirm or repair past injustices. So, in a sense, the idea or the purpose of affirmative action is to say, what's in here at my company looks like what's out there in the labor pool. Meaning in Ellensburg, Washington, if I am hiring for baristas at Starbucks and 51% of the Ellensburg population is female, then I would expect on average, flipping a coin, that 51% of the baristas in Starbucks would be female. And if 15% of the population is Hispanic, I would expect 15% of the baristas are Hispanic. So it's just what's in here, the composition of our organization looks, I'm going to be precise, like right on, but pretty darn close to what's out there that is in the labor pool. You can see some of the challenges. If you're hiring for an engineer in Ellensburg, the labor market for engineers in Ellensburg is not the city of Ellensburg. It's probably the state of Washington, or maybe even like the Pacific Northwest. So the labor pool doesn't just mean the city that it's in. It means where do you go for that type of person. I had the beginnings of a lawsuit once at Boeing. We were hiring for a unique blend of engineer called a crew ops engineer. They had to be a professional pilot. No, sorry, he's a human factors engineer. They had to be a professional pilot. They had to have a degree in psychology, and because they design like the cockpit, right? So how pilots would think, and they had to, of course, have an engineering degree so they could design all the parts and the components. And I had a nice conversation with the OFCCP, who basically said, "Hey, it looks like there's discrimination in this area." And I said, "Well, where do you have that I find these people?" And like, "Well, we looked at the demographics of Everett, Washington." I'm like, "What are you talking about? There are no human factors engineers in Everett, Washington, except for the ones that are at Boeing. Like, there's only two programs in the nation that make these people. So you can kind of push back and go, this is where I go to find this type of job, and that's what I'm using for my affirmative action plan." But again, you get the idea. The objective is my company looks like the labor market, and what the plan is just a document. It just means this is how we're going to try to make that happen. So if my company looks like what's in the labor market, like I'm hiring people and it looks pretty consistent, my affirmative action plan is a one-pager that says, here's our data, we're pretty comfortable with it, here are the things that we are doing to make sure we keep this kind of success going. Thank you very much. Love, company. And it's done. Affirmative action has had some blowback. The reverse discrimination, the first one, I think 70s, early 80s, back versus University of California. Really cool story. This guy, Minnesota, I think Minnesota undergrad, he's a Marine in the Navy. That's right, Marine in the Navy. Marine in Vietnam for several years. Came back, went to work at NASA as an engineer, and just always wanted to get into medicine. So he was rejected. At first it was for age, and he was rejected for a whole bunch of stuff to get into med school. And finally he kind of finds out at the end, like wait a second, my MCAT score was like a 72 or whatever it was. The average MCAT score that was brought in was 69. Mine was a 72, and you brought people who were MCAT score of 33 because they were non-white. And he goes, man, that's not right. So got a team of lawyers and sued. And when it kind of went to court, the ruling was it's not a problem that the University of California Med School used race. It's a problem because they had a quota for race with lower scores, and back got accepted into the program. Two other big ones, Hopwood versus State of Texas, University of Michigan. You can check them out if you want to. But the bottom line is when people think of affirmative action, they usually think of anybody non-white, maybe non-male, and maybe between the ages of 18 and 40. Well, here's the deal. It's illegal to discriminate based on gender, right? I have a gender. I don't think the law was necessarily written with that in mind, because at the time, certainly discrimination was much more for women. But if you discriminate against me based off of gender, it's still discrimination based off of gender. If you discriminate against Back because he's white, it's still discrimination based on race. So the idea here is, just because it doesn't fit into a minority category doesn't mean the law doesn't apply into that particular situation. So that's reverse discrimination. Usually if there's kind of quotas, like we're going to hire 100 people, but 30 of them have to be Hispanic. That kind of hard and fast quota, that's going to be illegal. Philosophical challenge, just a short, quick comment on this. This is where a lot of kind of the rhetoric and the discussion and the debates happen, and they're fun, they're robust debates. For some people, equality means equality of outcomes. For some people, equality means equality of opportunity to get those outcomes. Meaning, if I just paid everybody at my company a flat rate of $100,000 a year, that's equality of outcomes. If I gave everybody at my company, if I paid for a master's degree in accountancy or engineering or whatever, so if you want to go do the work, I will give you that opportunity. Everybody gets that opportunity to go do that. That would you say more is equality of opportunity. The weird case of universities that have bumped into lawsuits around affirmative action and EEO is because universities are both an outcome and an opportunity. So it's kind of a challenge. Who gets into a university is an outcome, like who gets in, right? But it's also an opportunity for future growth. Getting into Central Washington University or Harvard, they're very similar institutions. Getting into Harvard is an opportunity, but we also look at statistics and numbers of who gets accepted into Harvard. And if it's 95% X, 95% men, doesn't matter what you put there, you would go, well, wait a second, that doesn't really reflect the population very well. So it looks like the outcomes are unjust. Further, that's an opportunity, so that means the opportunity is also unjust. Anyway, it's just a fun debate, goes back and forth. You can figure out where you stand on that if you want to. I read this book a little while ago. This guy, Barry Wolf, he wrote a book called A Little Black Book of HR. It's full of kind of stories and principles. Thought it was interesting. And he was asked a question in an interview. He said, does any form of a discrimination like overtly happen today, or it happens at a high level? Is there sexual orientation and gender and race and religion? Like, do all those discriminations happen? You bet they do, right? 330 million people, whatever it is, I don't know, in the United States. It's going to happen. There's certainly going to be incidence rates. But the question was more like, is there any that people don't try to hide? And he said, yeah, there is. It's age discrimination. And age discrimination, once a person hits 50, 60, 70, they start going, ooh, you know what we need? We need fresh ideas. You might need fresh ideas, but that's code word for we need a younger person in that role. We'll get to age discrimination a little bit more, but I thought that was an interesting anecdote. All right, we are 34 minutes in. All right, I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. I might do a little slide skipping. I just want to make you aware of a bunch of laws. So the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, as it sounds, you can't discriminate against somebody who's pregnant. Family Medical Leave Act, up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave. If you qualify for it, you have to work a certain number of hours and be there, employed there for at least 12 months. But if you qualify for it, you get in a car wreck or something, you can't go to work, you get to keep that job, or you have to take care of a sick relative, whatever, you get to keep that job. It's unpaid leave, but you can go back to it. Equal Pay Act, that was about gender discrimination. Equal Pay Act actually passed in 1963, so it was just before the Civil Rights Act. Had to basically do with equal pay for equal work. Further regarding gender issues, there's a term glass ceiling and glass elevator. You're probably familiar with them. Glass ceiling basically says that in this company or this industry or whatever it is, women specifically can get promoted to a certain point but no higher. They can't get to the C-suite, meaning corporate executives. C-suite is like CEO, CFO, CHRO, COO, stuff like that. So that would be a glass ceiling. A glass elevator is where, yes, women can be in the C-suite in marketing and HR, but not in operations and finance. In certain areas, it's okay. In certain areas, it's not. There's a history of this. There's certainly been a lot of advancement on this in the future. And this is a super like robust discussion when you start looking at data and impact. When men and women come out, women usually make a higher salary than men. And that typically goes, this is a Bureau of Labor Statistics, that typically happens until about age 30, and then you see a quick break. Well, most people look at that and go, well, quite obviously, that's taking a break from a career to have kids. And on the other side, people argue, go, no, that's not the case. That's when they would get into the higher level positions and then get held back. So your experience, I'm sure, is unique, and perspective is unique. But I do want you to know those two terms.